Hello, New York Giants fans. Welcome back to the Everything New York Giants podcast with New York Giants fangirl. I'm your host, Adrianna. Today's podcast is recapping the absurd Giants loss to the Commanders. They lost 21-18. And there are so many things that are wrong with this game. But I want to start with this because the Giants are making history. Oh, they're making history all right. And it's never anything good. Last year, historically bad offensive line with 86 or 87 sacks. This year, we're in week 2, guys. This year, this game, they are the only NFL team in history to score 3+ touchdowns. Have the other team not score a single touchdown and still lose. How do you like that? Only the Giants, literally, only the Giants can do shit like this. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to start with the coaching decisions that got us here, because ultimately that's one of the major factors as to why the Giants lost this game. Then we're going to talk about the offense and we're going to talk about the defense. And special teams, the only thing that special teams did wrong, you know what's a shame, is that we lost the game because of special teams and it wasn't even their fault. It was the coach's fault. It's their fault as to why we lost the game. So let's go ahead and start here. Because last week, the Giants only had 51 players on the roster. Okay, 51 players. And their punt returner, Gunner, is coming off an injury, dealing with an injury for a couple weeks. All of a sudden, he's healthy. He's good to go. What did they not do? Just in case Gunner has a flare-up or anything, you know what they don't do is they don't add a punt returner to the roster. They did not elevate anyone from the practice squad. They did not sign a punt returner. They did not do any of that leading into the game. So what happens? Gunner deals with an issue last week. His groin re-aggravated during warm-ups, and they have to use Darius Slayton as a punt returner. Now, Darius Slayton as the punt returner is not why we lost the game. But the point I'm trying to make is that there are serious issues with this front office and with the coaching staff on figuring out how to put a fucking roster together. And I am sorry about the cursing, guys. I'm going to do my best to rein it in. But some of the decisions that this front office makes infuriate me to no end. And it's just, I can't control it. It is so idiotic. So stupid. Why are you going into a game with 51 players on the roster? Okay, so now they didn't learn their decision from last week, okay? And they also didn't learn from their mistake last year with Graham Gano, who lost us the Jets game. Okay? So we now have the separate incident from last year with Graham Gano, who's dealing with an injury, but they didn't really realize it until he misses kicks during the game. Explain to me how that happens. Someone on this fucking medical staff has a problem, and it's a big one. Okay? So we deal with that last year. 1 week ago, we have the Gunner issue. And then this week, Graham Gano all of a sudden pops up on the injury report approximately 24 hours before game time. Which God only knows how he got injured because they didn't practice on Saturday. But yes, okay, Graham Gano is on the injury report with a groin injury. Which, what the hell is going on and why does everyone have a groin injury this year? Gunner, him, McFadden had a groin, and many other players that I can't remember at this moment. But there have been multiple groin injuries. It's the new hamstring issue, apparently, this team and the medical staff. It is infuriating, okay? So now we have 2 instances where they have made bad decisions when it comes to the medical staff and it comes to roster management. So then now we've got a 3rd incident on Sunday where explain to me why I see multiple beat writers posting on Twitter before the game that Graham Gano is wincing and not looking great while he's practicing in pregame warmups. Okay? So they see that that's a problem. And then they have Jamie Gillen practicing kicking, and he hits a 50-yarder in warmups. Great. But here's the problem. You have a backup kicker on the practice squad. So explain to me why when you have the roster space, okay, they didn't have to move anyone off the roster. No one had to be downgraded to the practice squad. They had the space. They had 52 players on the roster. In case you forget, they're allowed 53. So they had an extra spot to add Jude to the roster. And they don't do it. What the fuck is wrong with them? Seriously, this is so disgraceful. It's now the third time that you're dealing with this issue. The third time in less than 1 year, and you can't figure it out. It's not like they had to go work out other kickers and they had to bring in someone else. He's on the practice squad. All they had to do was elevate him yesterday when Graham Gano popped up on the injury report. I don't give a shit if there's a salary cap issue. Figure it out. That's your job. Figure it out. I refuse to believe that it's that challenging. And you're gonna tell me you don't have enough money to elevate an international practice squad kicker? He's not Brian Burns making a shitload of money. He's an international player who probably makes less than literally like the minimum salary on this team. And they couldn't add him to the roster for salary reasons? It's a joke. It's a joke at this point because it is so asinine and ridiculous that this is a problem. And the report, like, I was just scrolling through Twitter and seeing the reports, and I'm just like, this has to be a sick joke, because I was reading that and was just like, this is the Giants. This is the Giants in a nutshell, and this is exactly what's gonna happen, and it's gonna come back and bite them in the fucking ass for the third time. And again, Gunnar isn't the reason why we lost the game last week, but Graham Gano is the reason why we lost the Jets game last year because he missed the kick. And also, it's why we lost the Rams game because we missed another kick with a backup kicker. Graham Gano is 37 years old, and I love Graham. He has been, honestly, one of the better players on this team since he's been here. But he's 37 years old, dealing with an injury, and you didn't have a backup plan, and that is disgraceful. There is no reason for it. Again, you had the space on the roster. There's just no excuse. I just don't understand the decisions that his coaching staff and the front office makes. For the first time since, I think, the Cardinals game, this offense actually scored 3 touchdowns. 3 touchdowns! And the Commanders scored 0. And we lost the game. That is literally unbelievable. It is unbelievable. If I didn't watch it with my own 2 eyes and actually see the way that the game played out and watch it happen, I literally would not believe that that's how the game ended, because it is so unbelievable and ridiculous. It is pathetic on so many levels. And the worst part, we're going to go into the offense here, because the worst part about this is that the offensive line had their best game for the Giants in likely a decade. Like, they have been so bad for so long, and they have one successful game where Malik Neighbors has over 100 yards as a receiver, and Devin Singletary has almost 100 yards as a rusher, and we can't even enjoy it. They let up one sack, and we couldn't even enjoy it because the defense is pathetic, and because we didn't have a fucking backup kicker when Graham Gano was on the injury report 24 hours before the game. It is pathetic, it is disgraceful, it is embarrassing. And the only reason why the Giants are not being talked about as much as other teams, which I know everyone is talking about the fact that we are the laughingstock, the only reason why it's not that bad is because the Panthers decided today to bench their number 1 pick, Bryce Young, who is worse than every single quarterback on the Giants. So, great news for us. It's just fucking great. It's so bad. It's so bad. And there's just so many bad things because the first 2 games of the season were winnable games. And listen, Minnesota is doing things that I under no circumstances expected them to do. So maybe they deserve a little bit more credit, which is fine. Minnesota is a better team than we all expected them to be, and that is great for them. But there is no excuse for the disgusting display of football that we saw last week against Minnesota. And now there is no excuse to lose to a team that couldn't throw the deep ball. They went 0 for 6 in the red zone, and we scored more touchdowns than them, and we still lost. There is literally no excuse for it. I don't even care if anyone gives a shit about the stats because it doesn't fucking matter. When we scored more touchdowns and we lost the game because of mismanagement of the roster, it is pathetic. It truly is pathetic. So with that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about the stats because there were a couple things that I think we should talk about. The first thing being that Daniel Jones only got sacked one time, and we can't even enjoy it, and we can't even talk about the O-line being a good thing on this team because everything else overshadowed that. And for so many of us going into this year, there were 2 biggest concerns, Daniel Jones and the offensive line. And for the first time in a long time, both of them played well enough to win the game. And the fucking defense and the kicker lost it for them. And it is pathetic. It is pathetic on so many levels. We also had over 100 yards rushing for the first time in a long time. Devin Singletary led the rushing attack with 16 carries for 95 yards. Jones was behind him, 5 for 32. Tyrone Tracy, 1 for 2. They had 129 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. The receiving core, 178 yards. Malik Neighbors led it with 18 targets. He had 10 receptions for 127 yards and 1 touchdown. If you are blaming Malik Neighbors for this loss, and if you are blaming Daniel Jones, I need you to watch the game and then shut the fuck up. Yes, Malik Neighbors should have caught that ball. Yes, Daniel Jones should have hit Malik Neighbors at least 1 out of the 4 times that he overthrew Neighbors on the long ball. I'm not excusing him for that. But outside of those things, they did enough to win the game. It's not on them. It's not on them as to why we lost this game. Malik Neighbors was one of the best players on the field yesterday. And he had literally 1 mistake. And he's a rookie. So it's not his fault. He had 127 receiving yards, okay? And a good portion of those came as yak, yardage after the catch, which is what we need from guys like him and Devin Singletary. And we saw it yesterday, Singletary breaking tackles. And again, it's just the Singletary fumble overshadowed things, and the Malik drop overshadowed things. But we need to keep in mind here that they might have not even been going for it on 4th and 4 because it was a 40-yard kick. And if it was Graham Gano who was out there, he would have just made the kick. And we wouldn't be having a discussion today about whether or not Malik Neighbors should have caught that ball. Darius Slayton had 3 targets for 33 yards. Also, dropped the 2-point conversion. The ball was a little high. He could have caught it. Wan'Dale Robinson, out of 4 targets, he had 2 receptions for 18 yards, one of them being a touchdown. It was really nice to see both Neighbors and Wan'Dale get touchdowns. Was happy for them both. I would have been happier if we won the game, but I feel like the offense did okay. After the awful, atrocious football play that we saw last week, this was a step in the right direction. So, positives. The positives coming out of the offense is they were better than honestly I was expecting them to be, because I really had no idea what to expect after what we saw last week. Devin Singletary, the fumble, total momentum shifter. After that, the offense was still able to move the ball. They just didn't have a fucking kicker who could have kicked. So you have to go for it on 4th down, and you have to go for the 2-point conversions, which obviously didn't work out. And when Dable was asked about the 2-point conversions as opposed to the kick, he said, well, Gillen missed the first field goal, so we didn't feel great about him going for the extra point and for going towards that, which I understand, but maybe after Slayton's first drop on the 2-point conversion, maybe you should have said, hey, he hit a 50-yarder in warm-ups and the guy can fucking boom it down the field on kickoffs and punts. Can we just give it a try? Just try it. You know what I think the worst part about this is that Dable says all the time is that I have confidence in all the players on the field. You obviously don't. You just do not. So don't ever fucking say that again. Okay? Let's move along to the defense because, one last thing on the offensive line. They were good. Jones was good enough. Not great, but good enough. Neighbors was good. Overall, the offense, for the most part, good. Giants O-line pass blocking through 2 games. This is from Talking Giants. Andrew Thomas, 1 sack. John Runyon, 1 sack and 1 quarterback hit. JMS, 1 quarterback hit and 2 pressures. GVR, 2 quarterback hits and 4 pressures. Jermaine Illuminor, 3 quarterback hits and 2 pressures. That means in 2 games, they have only given up 2 sacks. 2 sacks, which is amazing compared to what we saw at this time last year. And it's really upsetting to me that we cannot even enjoy this because of everything else that is going on. John Michael Schmitz had one of his better games last year. I feel optimistic about him. I feel good about this offensive line. It feels good to finally see these guys actually block for the quarterback. It feels good to see Daniel Jones not losing his fucking shit back there and actually being able to throw the ball and make good decisions and throw it away when you have to throw it away. He didn't have a single turnover. Like, these are the improvements that I want to see from week to week, and we're finally seeing them on the offense. And I know it's only been 2 weeks, but I say finally, it's been a long time of watching a horrible offense, starting with last year and going into last week. And this offense was not amazing again, but after what we saw last week, it was a hell of a lot better. And at this point with this team, I will take what I can get. The defense. After Shane Bowen was hired, I said he's not my favorite, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I am still willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because ultimately, I don't think that you can watch the defense the last 2 games and say it entirely falls on Shane Bowen because he's just okay. Not great, not horrible. I want to say he's kind of bad, but I'm not going to say that just yet because it's week 2. So let's see how things play out. At least let's get to the midway point in the season before I make a verdict on what I think about his defensive scheme. But part of it is the personnel. And they can't stop the run. Now, keep in mind, they were not good at stopping the run in Wink's defense. And I know people are going to come in here and say, you should have kept Wink. Guess what? The Giants should have done a lot of things that they didn't fucking do. So hindsight's 2020. My problem is that they are not learning from the mistakes, and that falls on Dable and Shane. And it's not about Shane Bowen, and it's not about the fact that they weren't able to stop the run then, and now they still can't stop the run. It is the fact that they made one mistake last week that they had the opportunity to fix this week, and they didn't fucking do it. Shane Bowen has nothing to do with that. Okay? The missed tackles and the lack of stopping the run, they look like an amateur football team, and I expect more from them. I expect more. The talent is better. I am not saying that this is one of the top 10 defenses in the league when it comes to a talent perspective, but they are a hell of a lot better than what we have seen on the field. The talent is better, and I don't know why they can't fucking do it. Jaden Daniels might have been covered in butter yesterday by the lack of missed tackles and the fact that no one could get him down. Why? The kid probably weighs 200 pounds soaking wet, maybe less, and they still couldn't bring him down. I know that he's fast. I know he got rid of the ball quickly. That was exactly going to be their plan going into it. And for the second week in a row, they couldn't stop the plan. And what pisses me off more is that I have to listen to these fucking post games, and I have to listen to someone like Brian Burns say, like he said last week, that, oh, we knew what they were going to do. They stuck to the game plan. But we couldn't stop it. You couldn't make any adjustments from the first half to the second half to fucking stop it? Why did you have to let them get to the red zone and beat themselves with multiple false starts almost every single time that they were in the red zone before you guys could make a fucking stop? It's pathetic. They didn't even throw the ball down the field. Daniels looked like he was afraid to do it. And yet we couldn't stop the run between Brian Robinson and Jaden Daniels. They ran all over us. I don't even know how many rushing yards. They had 215 rushing yards on the ground and 226 through the air. And the longest one was 34 yards. They didn't give up 60-yard bombs down the field. Even a 40-yarder, they didn't even give that up. But because no one knows how to tackle, they couldn't stop it. I saw a stat today that said that they only had 11 missed tackles, and I actually refuse to believe that that is the right number because it cannot possibly be the right number because I could have sworn that it was at least 100. And Jason Pinnock led out of all 11 with 3 of them. The defense is just so disappointing. And I didn't expect them in week 2 to look like a top 10 defense. Okay? I would have given them the whole season. But I expected them to be able to maybe force the Commanders to punt the ball. And they didn't allow them to punt once. Not a single time yesterday. Not a single punt. And on top of that, they had 14 third down opportunities. They converted on 7 of them. 5 out of the 7 were 3rd and long. 3rd and 13, 3rd and 10, there was a 3rd and 8, and probably everything else was 3rd and 9, 3rd and 11, probably a third, honestly, it might have well has been a 3rd and 26 at that point, the way that they were going. And they couldn't stop it. Just absolutely horrible. Micah McFadden led the team with 13 tackles. Drew Phillips, who is one of the bright spots on this team, and I have to say, thank God that he is on this team because I would have nothing good to say coming out of this defense, coming out of this game, if it wasn't for him. He had 12 tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for loss, and 1 quarterback hit. He is a guy that at least we can be excited about. And we've talked a lot about Joe Shane's draft picks and how they all need to play well. And the fact that Drew Phillips in week 2 of his rookie year is looking like he's going to be a stud. He's an impact player. He was a good pick. And I will give Joe Shane that. And Malik Neighbors was a good pick. And I think that Newbin is also going to be a great pick in this draft. He's gotten a lot of things wrong, but these guys have been good and they're fun to watch, and they are some of the only bright spots to come out of this god-awful football team. So thank God for Drew Phillips that we have something to look at. What I will say about Drew Phillips is that flag was a joke, an absolute joke. Again, a 3rd and long. That was a 3rd and long that wouldn't have been converted if it wasn't for that flag. And that was total BS. So, 80 total tackles for the defense, 53 solo, 10 tackles for loss, 3 pass deflections, 7 quarterback hits, and 5 tackles. I'm sorry, 5 sacks. And we can't even be excited about this defense had 5 sacks. Jason Pinnock had 2 of them. Bobby Okereke had 1. Drew Phillips had 1. Micah McFadden had 1. 5 sacks. And it doesn't even matter because they couldn't do anything else to help this team. So I don't even think there's any good things to talk about. For the defense, Jason Pinnock, 9 tackles, Bobby O, 8. Bobby O had a decent stat line, 8 total tackles, 4 solo, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, 1 pass deflection. Quickly, Thibodeau had a better game this week than he did last week. I still want to see more from him. He had 4 tackles, 3 solo, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 quarterback hits. So it was nice to see him wake up a little bit. Still would have liked to see more from him. Brian Burns is really disappointing to me so far. And I know people are going to be like, he's a bust, and people are going to say Kayvon's going to be a bust, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I'm not going to do it yet. It's week 2. And I understand that this team is 0-2 and that they find new ways to lose literally every single week. And they are not fun to watch. I understand all of those things, but there are still 14 more games left plus a bye. And I'm just not ready to say that these players are busts. I still have hopes for them. They are learning a new defense. And the only thing I am hoping is that they just haven't figured it out yet. And listen, they're about 2 weeks too late, but if they figure it out week 3 and the defense makes plays and they figure out how to beat the Browns, maybe, just maybe, we can salvage this season. I don't really feel that great about it, but could be a possibility. It's just very frustrating. I mean, you look at the schedule, First of all, I love the NFL memes Instagram. I think they're so funny. I hate it when they rip on the Giants, obviously. But if you look at the Giants schedule, they posted a thing either today or yesterday saying like, there's like a 99% chance that the Giants are going to go 0-8, which is very horrifying, but also probably pretty real. And it's just really disappointing because the first 2 games of the season were winning games, opportunities for them to take home the win, and they just couldn't do it. And it's just really hard to feel optimistic about where we're going. I don't want to end this on a completely negative note. The one last thing I want to talk about here is on special teams, the kick returns. Eric Gray. And this is what I mean with Dable not learning from his mistakes. There already have been multiple instances on this. Adoree Jackson is another perfect prime example of this, of how he got injured on a punt return. But let's go ahead and when he's healthy, put him back there. Sign a fucking punt returner, okay? They signed one last week who wasn't back there. But then again, he wasn't back there because the defense couldn't force the Commanders to punt. So it's all bad. Anyway, Eric Gray, 5 returns for 128 yards. Honestly, he was not bad. Was I crossing my fingers and holding my breath every time I saw him back there on the kick return? Yes. But, at least he didn't bobble it or fumble it. So take what I can get with these Giants. Anyway, I'm going to end it on this, that I know we're all frustrated and I know that this team sucks and I know that they are not fun to watch. But there are good things that came out of week 2. And that is something that I hope helps everyone sleep at night. The fact that this offensive line for the first time in a long time is good and something to be happy about. And, I hope that they can continue that next week against Myles Garrett. So with that being said, I will be back later this week with an episode previewing the Giants versus Browns Sunday 1 o'clock game in Cleveland.